elected to member of the Ohio Board of Education since 2019. She's chairman of Totally Engaged Americans, a community group of conservatives in Lorain County. It was founded in 2009 and meets monthly. She also helps lead Free Ohio Now, which was founded in 2020, a reaction to the government tyranny. Kirsten and her husband Andy operate a family's year-round farm market in Lorain County for the last 25 years. She also ran a seasonal farm tour business, hosting families in preschool through elementary classes for many years. She has 2 children, one a software developer and the other is a physician. Prior to a small business owner, she worked as a certified public accountant in Cleveland and Ann Arbor. Kristen is an Amherst School educating foundation. Kristen was on the Amherst School's Education Foundation Board for 20 years and on Amherst Township Board of Zoning Appeals for 15 years, most of them as the chairman. Kristen's degree is in accounting and a master's degree in business administration. She's a member of the Republican County Central Committee and a candidate for the Republican State Central Committee. Kristen?
Just a few finer points on that. We don't run the market anymore, but we did run a farm market for 25 years. And I was a candidate for State Central Committee a few times, which probably helped to get my name out there when I ran for the state board. You know what, let me just get a little sense here. How many of you have been to a session where somebody's talked about kind of describing what critical race theory is? Okay, just a few. All right, good. Then I'll let me kind of give you the sort of full explanation. I've been talking on the topic since May. I've talked to about 30 groups now, and it's been. There's more material every day, so I can probably talk for a few hours, but we won't go there. It's about 7:30. I should ask you. You want about an hour? Is that good? Is that good, Jim? About an hour? Yeah. Okay. All right. Because once I get going, I can just go. I like to start out. I read in the springtime an article by Victor Davis Hanson. It was in the Epic Times, and the title was "How Much Ruin Is Left?" And it was referring to the book by Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, which I have not read. But what he's referring to is we're kind of living on the crumbs of our republic. So it seems like everything's okay, but obviously by you all being in the room, you're starting to recognize that not everything is okay. And critical race theory is a topic and an issue across the country. So I'm so glad you're here and willing to learn. What I'm going to do is talk just a little bit about the Ohio Board of Education, so you know a little bit about the composition and what we're responsible for, and then I'll share some of the terminology to watch out for related to critical race theory and how it's being implemented. Another topic: has anyone ever heard the term action civics or new civics or service learning? Anybody? Okay, so that's cutting edge. And I will describe what that's about, because that's happening at the same time in the schools. And then I have a whole bunch of things you can do, but just kind of, I would say the main thing is to get yourself knowledgeable and share the word with others. So so a little bit about the board. The Ohio Board of Education is called for in the Ohio Constitution. In the early 1950s is when it was put into the Ohio Constitution. And it was an all-elected board from the early 50s to the late 90s. So about 50 years. And then Voinovich, the governor, came in and he was going to be the education governor. and through some late at night machinations with the legislature, he got 8 appointees added. So there are currently 11 elected members. Well, the revised code calls for 11 elected members and 8 governor-appointed members. So those governor appointees have a high influence, and they're not accountable to the people. In fact, right now, in actuality, well, we had the president and a member resign just before the election at the request of the governor, and as well as the state superintendent and the assistant superintendent also resigned. So we have there's quite a bit of kind of an English ship right now. But before the last 2 resignations of those 2 appointed members, there are actually not 8 appointed members, but 9, because Sarah Fowler won her seat in the Ohio House and moved from the state board to the House. That gave the governor 1 more seat to fill. So we're in fact 10 elected members, 9 appointed members, almost 50%. So anyway, that's the makeup of the board. There is a bill right now pending to try to get rid of those appointed members, which I did testify House Bill 298. So a little bit about the responsibility of the board. The Ohio Revised Code 3301, and there's just like a handful of things here. I'll just sort of go through them quickly. The responsibilities are policy, planning, and evaluative functions for public schools, policies related to instruction and materials, building and equipment, administration of personnel, financing, and organizing school districts, standard financial reporting by local districts, to administer and supervise the allocation of state and federal funds, which on an annual basis, the state amount is usually in the 10 billion, 11 billion range, and to federal money, I think, is usually about $2 billion. Though, since March of 2020, with all the COVID money flying out of Washington, D.C. into the states, the federal money has been $6 billion. So it's been 60% of our regular, so they're having a windfall right now. And that gets distributed out to local districts based on their average attendance enrollment at those schools. We prescribe minimum standards related to professional licensing, teachers, materials, libraries, health and sanitation, oversight of non-public schools. We also sort of rubber stamp a biennial budgetary request that goes from the Department of Education to the legislature. And the Department of Education is separate from the board. Basically, the organizational chart is the board, and then we hire the superintendent, or pick the superintendent, the board does, and then he supervises the 550 employees, or he or she supervises 500 plus employees of the Ohio Department of Education. And we also oversee the procedures, standards, and guidelines for children with disabilities. And anything on this list and anything else the board may desire, we can instruct the superintendent of public instruction or the state superintendent to handle these items. And most of them are delegated to the superintendent, and then those department members handle all those responsibilities. So that gives you just a little idea. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about some of the terminology and how critical race theory is implemented in Ohio. I have my slides posted on my website, and everything is linked and referenced, so it's KirstenHill.com. I'm not going to play this video right now, but there's several videos in here that are helpful. This one's 4 minutes long, and is an easy way to share with others what it means. Okay, so some of the terminology. You know what, I'm going to refer to this first. The National Association of Scholars is a think tank, a conservative group, and they along with a few others, have been, right up front informing and trying to get the knowledge out about this. And basically, critical race theory is an offshoot of Marxism. Critical theory was the term, and then Harvard professor in the 1970s, Derek Bell, took the lead in adapting Marxist critical theory to civil rights and came up with critical race theory. He asserted that seemingly fair and open institutions had a hidden racist component that blocked black progress. Originally an academic movement, critical race theory gained adherents who realized it could be an effective rhetorical tool applied to virtually every area of politics and society. Just a couple other highlights. It further asserts that every difference in outcomes between identity groups must be exclusively the consequence of systemic racism. So there's no discussion about the difference in outcome being based on performance or merit or choice. They want to look at everything through a racial lens instead of merit-based. And critical race theory's liberation, firstly, requires imposing equity, and I think that Skip mentioned that word, equal outcomes for all identity groups in every aspect of politics, society, and culture. So that's, and I have just a few copies, but I also on my website have 3 long lists of vocabulary that, because you won't necessarily hear or see the word critical race theory, but you will hear the words diversity, equity, inclusion, whiteness. Let's see, culturally responsive curriculum, anti-racist, racial sensitivity, unconscious or implicit bias, cultural awareness, white supremacy, white privilege, that sort of thing. So I would encourage you to get familiar with that. Equity, and this is, equity means treating students differently depending on their membership in historically privileged or oppressed racial groups. Students from oppressed groups are to be given special treatment because of their race, with the ultimate goal of ensuring equal outcomes for all groups regardless of merit or effort. So they want special treatment for certain people who are more oppressed. And this is a picture that depicts on the left is equality. So you don't want to make equality and equity are 2 different things. Equality, as shown on the left, is each boy gets the same size box. And they can all 3 see over the fence to see the baseball game. Whereas equity, the tops of their heads are all the same. Equal outcome, nobody gets to see over the fence, and the tallest boy is pulled down, and the shovel is critical race theory digging the hole. I spent the last 3 days in Columbus at the Ohio School Board Association, and in fact I popped in on a session, and one of the administrators from the Akron City Schools had this image, but he now had a 3rd box and he describes it as liberation. The fence comes down, and anyway, it was interesting to see him using the same thing, and they're going to distribute all the funds in Akron through an, with equity in mind. Okay, I'm going to jump around a bit, and there's a lot of information. I have been on the board, and my first couple years, or year and a half, I didn't realize just how ignorant I was about how this is embedded, the terminology. So I have examples of things that I have seen there at the department, just reading through the website or getting in materials through committees that I'm on. And so here is something related to the PBIS system, which is the positive behavior interventions and support, something like that. And there you go, embed the core components of cultural responsiveness. And then this is the whole child framework is part of the strategic plan And this is really, my co-board member, Diane Hessler, has done a lot of work on this. I'm not extremely fluent on this, but this chart shows the child in the center, and then those triangular pieces around the outside are basically the school. Culturally responsive is one of the terms there, and the family is separated from the child. And then you have the community partnerships outside of that. So that's their vision to separate the children from that's the divisiveness. And actually Sarah Fowler in her bill HB 327 uses that term. They don't use critical race theory in their bill, but divisive concepts related to race or sex, that sort of thing. Anti-racist is another term. This is a picture of a gentleman named Ibram Kendi, and he's sort of the ringleader or godfather of the chief marketing officer. I think he was called by Christopher Rufo, who's written quite a bit on critical race theory. He was born Ibram Henry Rogers, and he's currently the director of the Center of Anti-Racist Research at Boston University. And he says the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. And then it goes further, the only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Basically, very anti-Western civilization. So other ways that critical race theory is making its way into the schools is spending time on sorting out children based on race, and there are examples that have been showing up on that, and essentially it reduces the amount of focus on academics, like language, math, arts, and sciences. For example, in Virginia, they are getting rid of algebra, algebra 2, and geometry for all students before 11th grade. That's part of that leveling. Another example, and this is common, how many of you have had to go through bias training, implicit bias training? Okay. Okay. I have an article here about a woman's experience. Her name's Jody Shaw, and she was at Smith College. This is from the Epic Times. And basically, it creates a real hostile environment. Every day I watch my colleagues manage student conflict through the lens of race, projecting rigid assumptions and stereotypes on students, thereby reducing them to the color of their skin. I'm asked to do the same, as well as to support a curriculum for students that teaches them to project those same stereotypes and assumptions onto themselves and others. I believe such curriculum is dehumanizing. It's an environment which, dissenting from the new critical race theory orthodoxy, or even failing to swear fealty to it, it's almost like a religion. Like some kind of McCarthy-era loyalty oath is grounds for public humiliation, and she goes on. Critical race theory has been spreading through U.S. institutions, starting at the universities and seeping down into K-12 education. So this is related to a college campus, but it's been on the college campus for a couple years, a couple decades. In fact, it's sort of an outgrowth of the 70s, postmodern, everybody has their own truth. And now they figured out how to operationalize it through critical race theory in K-12 schools. This was another example. In Oregon, they were getting rid of academic standards, period. Okay, this is in Ohio. There's several associations for the various subject matter of teachers, and in this case, it's math. And the executive director, her name is Yoke, was profiled in the Akron Beacon Journal in the springtime, and some of the items that she talked about were to promote policies and practices in math that support equity and inclusiveness. There's an overrepresentation of white students and often experience. Right here is trainings this is screenshots of trainings that were done by the Ohio Department of Education for math teachers. This was this August, and you can see the terminology in these online sessions that they had. Equitable, high-quality instruction, reasoning in the math classroom, intentionally interweave the development of social and emotional competencies. And I think you see terminology, doing collaborative, and I'm thinking, I don't think I ever collaborated any to do math problems. Sort of more individual. We're gonna come up, we're gonna work together, and have a consensus on what the answer is. Other ways that it's getting in is through professional development and conferences. This is an invitation that I got from Kent State University for an annual conference, and all the yellow on there are terminology, change agents, making a real change, inclusive, promoting equity for Black and brown students, equitable access to schools, culturally responsive, authentically serve, LGBTQ school community, influence of implicit bias, and so on. So anyway, I'm demonstrating that it's getting through the new teachers coming off the college campuses. Is coming through professional development that the current teachers are in, or administrators.
Kristen, stay a little bit to the left, you're blocking that.
Oh, okay, okay. I should have asked that before. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna, I have more examples of how it's being embedded into the system. But I'm gonna switch gears here on you, keep you awake. I'm going to ask you about action civics. So Stanley Kurtz wrote an article in the American Mind, and this was how I first became aware of this, and he was highlighting a report that is titled, I have a picture of the cover right here, yeah, Making Citizens, How American Universities Teach Civics. And this is like a 500-page report, and it was done by the National Association of Scholars. And he has profiled a handful of universities, but David Randall is the writer of this report. It was published in January 2017. Well, the motivation to do the study was based on a 2012 report issued out of a task force from the Obama White House. That was, the task force wrote a report. It was called the Crucible Moment, and it was led by the Association of American Colleges and Universities. And the Crucible Moment, College Learning and Democracy's Future. It called on the higher education community, its constituents and stakeholders, to embrace civic learning and democratic engagement as an undisputed educational priority for all of higher education, public and private, 2 and 4 year. This report is a notable and influential text whose content and creation illuminate the nature of the new civics movement today. So that was 2012. Then it took them a while to write a report. This was in January 2017. And in fact, there's a very informative video when they rolled this out. Stanley Kurtz, David Randall, and another gentleman spoke in D.C. And what's happening here is he has collected actual names and departments and colleges and the courses that on these college campuses that are recruiting and training students to be activists. So suddenly they're interested, the other side is interested in civics. They're interested in civic activism versus civic literacy. I'm telling you, you have to watch every word. You have to know that the definitions of them change. So that's part of what you're seeing. Last summer, 2020, suddenly, there was all the activism going on and the canceling of conservative speakers on college campuses. Ben Shapiro and other, And Liz Wheeler has a couple-minute video on this, and it talks about Action Civics and the current House. I think I have it later in my slides, but the current U.S. Senate and U.S. House have bills to fund these fund civic activism at $1 billion a year. So that's also happening with this critical race theory. They want to turn the students into activists. And 2 states already have require Action Civics, Illinois and Massachusetts. And she calls it partisan progressive political activism. And other terms for this are civic engagement, new civics, project-based civics, service learning. The service learning, just to give you an idea, so I've read a quarter of the Making Citizens report, and that talks about how the students on a college campus, they will enroll in a course, and this is mostly in the humanities courses, in the what I call the grievance studies. You've got the Black studies, feminist studies, LGBTQ studies, those areas. And the teacher colleges are probably the epicenter of this. And so you might have NGOs, non-government organizations, who are doing, some sort of service or maybe even campaigning in the community, campaigning and maybe in some issue or politics. They will, as part of the coursework, and the college student will get credits to work for that NGO. The NGO will get free labor, and the parents will be paying for the student to get the credit. So that's all happening. It sounds great, hands-on, but be wary that it's civic activism, not civic literacy. In a nutshell, it's a theory that students will acquire, and this I think is Stanley Kurtz's description. It's a theory that students will acquire know-how of civics best through direct political action. Instead of classroom work, they go out of the classroom and engage in political activism to learn about our system of government. So they won't know there's 3 branches of government. They won't know that there's equal justice under law. They won't know the Ohio Constitution or the U.S. Constitution, but they'll know how to, rally and do things. This also I thought was very good from Stanley Kurtz. True civic education conveys the purpose, nature, and contours of our constitutional republic, tells the story to uphold its founding principles of equal rights and liberty, and cultivates virtues necessary to the republic's preservation. What civic education very deliberately does not attempt to do is to supply students with substantive political positions. That is for the student themselves to determine as free individuals in the fullness of time. So when teachers have Black Lives Matter flags or Obama activism, anything that is partisan or if they're not supplying both sides, and it's not really a discussion, it's indoctrination into the beliefs of that teacher. And these are the 2 bills that fund this civic activism. September 2021 in the House to direct the Secretary of Education to establish a civic education and service learning program. I mean, if I didn't tell you those terms, you wouldn't think, you wouldn't, oh, that sounds okay, right? And there was actually a conference already just a few weeks ago, and you go online. CivX Now is a project of iCivics, and so this is the rollout, and I think I have another sheet here, and they have pages of logos of various organizations that support this. And they are working, the CivX Now is a coalition of partners from diverse viewpoints working to create a culture shift that elevates civic education. They're lying, it's not really, or education means something different. And engagement as a national priority in order to protect and strengthen America's constitutional democracy. Anyway, and then at the bottom there I've highlighted inclusive and engaging K-12 civic learning, both in and out of school. a little bit on another way that critical race theory has gotten into the Ohio schools. So, has anybody heard of Resolution 20? Okay, a couple people. This was the state board, any member can bring forth a resolution. And typically, you give the courtesy of a month's notice. So in June of 2020, President Kohler brought forth a resolution. Now, remember, in June of 2020 was when the Minnesota was on fire, the George Floyd incident, and they used everything was staged and ready to go, and many organizations just used that incident as the rollout, including the Ohio State Board of Education president. And so she had a half-page resolution wanting to acknowledge the event, which this is Action Civics on the board. I didn't even know it at the time, but that's what I would call it. Anyway, it didn't seem too bad. Well, by the time the July meeting rolled around, that resolution had totally changed. There were 4 of the more progressive members on the board, including the president, had written more of a 2-page resolution that has all the buzzwords in it, and I have the timeline here of the public testimony and so on, but I want to just jump ahead. So one of the clauses in this resolution is, whereas equity is our plan's greatest imperative and #1 principle. Okay, so it's #1. Equal outcomes are #1, according to the strategic plan. The strategic plan was passed approved by the board in about 2018. And this still survives, and still the whole Department of Education in Ohio is organized around this strategic plan, which is full of critical race theory. And then I have on this page also definitions of equity. But I want to go back to this to show you a little bit about the politics of the approval of this resolution. So this is the vote and how it turned out. Those in yellow are the appointed members. And you can see that there were 7 appointed members present that evening. And this was after 12 hours of an online meeting. At 8 p.m. at night, we started deliberation on this. And the first thing I did was make a motion, could we postpone this till the next meeting. But they were dead, they were...
Kristen, these are appointed by Dwayne?
These were, actually, they were originally appointed by Kasich. And then this January, 4 were reappointed. But there's quite a bit of movement. DeWine did appoint one of them, Reggie Wilkinson, and he's not even on the board anymore because he moved him to the Ohio State Board, the Ohio State University Board.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Do more damage.
But we got a replacement, don't worry. So, in fact, so this resolution that basically rolled out and strongly recommended to local school districts to look through an equity lens through their operations, their hiring, their curriculum, their whole operation of their local schools, considering all that equity stuff. If the appointees were not on the board, the resolution would not have been approved. It would have been 5-5 with 1 abstention, or maybe even 5-6, because the no probably voted the no side. But that just gives you a little idea of the influence of the appointed members. Other clauses in the resolution are that implicit bias training was required of all OD employees and contractors. And that we strongly, as I mentioned, strongly recommend that all Ohio school districts examine hiring, curriculum, and student discipline for internal bias. Okay, fast. Sure.
Are you saying that whole framework that was voted on is still in place?
No.
Although the resolution's changed?
I'll fill in the blanks right now. Yeah. So after that resolution was in July of 2020, September, October, November, we had a deluge of public testimony against it at the state board. I mean, it's been, even though we're a small 5 conservative block on the 19-member board, the conversation's all been on our side for a year. And it's just been an incredible thing to see, because lo and behold, it's national. It wasn't just here in Ohio. So after the November meeting, 3 meetings of getting this pounded with this public testimony that didn't want this stuff, and we're like laughing underneath the table. This board president said, we're not going to have it. I'm not going to allow any more public testimony on this. People can write the testimony and submit it in writing, but we're not going to have any. So essentially cutting out First Amendment rights for people to come and speak. And, so from December through April, then in April, someone filed a lawsuit against the board and against 5 individual members of the board because of curtailing their First Amendment rights. That was Dan Reginald of How Are You? And then, so now the conservatives, we are in contact pretty much daily with each other through text, and we are starting to go on offense. So our first move was to have the Attorney General issue a legal opinion about the resolution passed last summer. And I would have to say that Yost came out on our side all the way. And his cover letter to his legal opinion, which said that the requiring of contractors to take implicit bias training was not legal. And then there were a few other things, but he really needs more information to make judgments about other items in the resolution. So that's an opportunity we could go back to him and provide more information for him to make further opinions. Okay, I need to finish the story. So then that was July, and we had to do a board member resolution in order to get the request to and we did manage to get a majority of the board to send a letter to Yost to ask him to give us an opinion. And then the next month, in I think it was August or September, Dr. Kilgore, another conservative, submitted a resolution that we wanted to turn around the president's stopping of people being able to testify on critical race theory and 1619 project. Lo and behold, it was hard for, we got the majority of the board to agree, yes, the public should be able to come speak. So it's just been, so we, have had a favorable outcome for that. So now people can come speak without issue at the board, without the board president, who is no longer there. And then in October, another of the conservatives, Brendan Shea, brought forth a resolution to repeal Resolution 20 from July of 2020. And lo and behold, I think somebody talked to those appointed members because, I don't know if I'm just jumping around a little bit here. Well, I have a colored slide like this to show the vote, but I think it must be in another of my slide collections. Essentially, it came out 10 to 7. 10 voted to repeal this resolution, along with saying that we're more focused on academics. We would like to be focused on academics instead of this other stuff. So that does provide some relief. There was a bit of news about that, but the strategic plan still carries on, and it's got all the elements of critical race theory in it. So we got some, not to worry. Okay, other ways that critical race theory is embedded in the Ohio system. The Ohio Principal Evaluation System. And over 90% of schools use this, will be using this this new version, OPES 2.0, probably starting next school year. And I've just done a screenshot on page 26 in this particular box. This is what's called a rubric, which I didn't know what a rubric was until I was on board, really. But that is left to right, the less accomplished principal over to the more accomplished is described in these boxes. And this particular section of the evaluation system deals with culture and equity in the school. And I've pulled out in the red box what it says in the most, for a principal to be considered the most accomplished in this category. It says the administrator or the principal proactively addresses individual and collective behaviors across the system that disregard and or defy equity and cultural responsiveness. Okay, so what that means is that if a principal comes across a teacher who does not proactively use equity and cultural responsiveness in their classroom, they need to be called out for it. If the principal wants to be rated as accomplished. So, and that's anti-racism. That's the anti-racism thing. You cannot be neutral. You have to be proactively what would be called an ally. So, it's something that, as a white person, we can never accomplish it. I even asked somebody who was testifying at our board in October. I said, how do you know when you've reached equity? There wasn't an answer. So this is meant to be, there is, you don't get there. It's just forever. And then also in the Ohio teacher evaluation system, by virtue of the requirement of the principal to make sure that the teacher is doing equity and cultural responsiveness, it's in the teacher's requirements that they do equity and cultural responsiveness in their classroom. I can't speak at length about what exactly that looks like all the time, but we do have, I do have a few examples. But another element that, similar to that, jumping off to give you the highlights of Action Civics, is something called student-centered learning. I mean, that sounds nice, right? But in fact, I have a whole other slide deck that's on my website that I dug down into this student-centered learning a bit. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, a related term to student-centered learning is critical theory. Can't make this stuff up. Anyway, and there's another term called constructivism. And I think it's, all kind of stemming out of that postmodernism. Everybody has their own truth, kind of constructing things. Yeah. The teacher becomes, if it's student-centered, this teacher becomes more of a facilitator, not the pedagogue at the front of the class. And I was recently at Ohio Freedom Fighters meeting, and they had someone present from the Northwest Ohio Classical Academy about what a classical education is, which would be something that we would be more supportive of. A classical education is teacher-centered, and that's probably, more traditional education. So, in fact, student-centered learning is entirely different. And I have several links in here showing how the Ohio Department of Education has been implementing it. I want to point out the first item that I have on the list, the Anti-Racist and Allyship Starter Pack. I didn't know really what allyship, I never had seen the word allyship before that. Essentially, it's a Google document that was linked on the Ohio Department of Education website until I found it. And then it just kind of disappeared in the dark of night. And, but it is a list of resources for teachers to go to. Videos, articles, books, materials that they can use in their class to help roll out anything related to this critical race stuff into the classroom. An ally would be someone who wants to be a friend of those that are oppressed. One other item that I show on here is there's actually, the 1619 project has been another issue at the board. Quite a lot of conversation around this. It is still linked on the Ohio Department of Education website. And it's false information, but it's there for teachers to use, when they're.
How does the school board allow that?
Well, that was part of how that other sheet came off, because we asked, how are these things getting on the website? And nobody could seem to find. Some guy holed up in some corner in the department put it up there. So there was no trail to know exactly how it got on there, but they were refusing to take it off. And I imagine partly why they're refusing to take it off is because there's money available to teachers through the Pulitzer Center that gave the award to the author, Nicole Hannah-Jones. You could get $5,000 directly as a teacher, and guess who the main funder is of that? Facebook.
So who's they? Who's they refuse to take it off? Your school?
The department, right, well, we have tried. We've tried to take it off. We got another rubric written up now about when new materials are suggested by maybe a social studies teacher out there, and they want to share it with others, and they want it posted on the Ohio Department of Education website. Well, now we have, there was a subcommittee of the board that came up with the filter that it has to go through now. Well, in the process of writing it is why they took off the Google document, because I think they figured out it wouldn't have passed muster now on the filter that is there. But, yeah,
The 1619 project
is still there.
Filter?
Right, well, that's another question. So we have this filter. Should we maybe look at all the materials that are on this site still? Would they be approved if they were under that filter?
Even if your school is not teaching CRT, and a lot of them are saying, we're not teaching 1619, but are they teaching CASEL? Are they teaching social and emotional learning? CRT 1619 is embedded, it is already written in it, therefore they do not have to say we have CRT.
Right.
So you have to really be careful. If they are doing social and emotional learning, you're screwed.
It's
something that you have got to get in there and fight, because it's disgusting. And if you have a school system and they're doing surveys, you need to get a copy, and you each need to make sure that you have a paper that you sign that your child is allowed to opt out of the surveys, opt out of some movies. Please be very well informed, because they've already embedded this into what they have rolled out in Ohio due to cutting the funding in the budget, and then they'll say, well, we're going to give you this much money, but you can't do SEL.
Another example, Hilliard Schools. This is an image of papers in a hallway. And what it says on this paper is, I pledge, and the child has to fill this out, I pledge to be an intersectional ally by X. Intersectional, what that means is, an oppressed person can have multiple items that they on the hierarchy or ladder of being oppressed, if they're gay, black, female, transgender, just all of that wrapped in any thing. So this is getting into what she's mentioning, social emotional learning, that's into the values, attitudes, and beliefs, which, like you mentioned about character, to teach in the home versus at school. I have many pages and links to the Rocky River. These are all Ohio schools here, and you'll see parents speaking up at school board meetings in their particular school districts. Another organization, the National Education Association.
Let's go. on the website so we can go look at it?
Oh, I doubt it, but I can.
Is it worth
Anyway, okay, and this is a list of teachers who pledged to continue teaching CRT in their states. And this is not updated, but there's several thousand around the country who pledged to continue. And this was about the grants that are given to teachers if they teach in the classroom. Another way it's getting into the schools is through the school districts hiring the Diversity Center of Northeast Ohio, the Ohio State School Board, or the Ohio School Boards Association, the meeting I was just came from, also has a list of vendors that school districts will hire and have them come in to do things like equity audits, or they'll hire a dean of diversity, dean of equity, dean of inclusion. These individuals, this is a whole, it's a $1 billion industry. Yes. The Ohio School Board Association also provided a webinar in August where school districts and administrators, school boards and administrators in local districts could go learn how to write an equity policy. And the latest estimate that a policy would cost about $34,000. So they just go from district to district and sell their wares. This, okay, a little bit about the authority of the local school district really rests with them. If they say, oh, well, we can't do this. In fact, in the Ohio Revised Code, it is the responsibility of Ohio's local boards of education to vet and approve curriculum and educational materials for use in the public schools within their district. And so, when you're at your local school boards, they are the ones who are responsible for what's going on in that school district.
But they tell us they follow the Ohio Board of Education and their curriculum, whatever, you know, when they take their mark.
Well, the standards are followed, they have to follow the Ohio standards, but the curriculum that's used to meet the standards is their choice. The board and the department, you know, the state board does provide a model curriculum that they can utilize, which many districts do use, which I've been trying to do a little bit of research to see how much critical race there is even within the model curriculum. But that local district still, you know, makes the approval of the curriculum that's used in the books and materials.
So how many different choices are there for local school districts? I mean,
There's lots of vendors, but some of the big ones are like Pearson Publishing. And in fact, those books they are already written from an equity role perspective. For example, we had a subcommittee meeting of the board, and there was a vendor, Pearson came in and was telling us about the assessments that a teacher candidate has to take. You know, they have to, if they're going to teach math, if they're going to teach science or English. Someone asked him a question about the books, and had they been looked at, you know, gone through, you know, from an equity perspective. And he did say the top 100 titles, yes, they've all been gone through, including, I believe he said, including the preferred pronouns and that whole thing. So those books coming out of the top 100 sales books out of Pearson would already be woke.
Yes.
what about the current panorama education?
Yes, you know what, I'm almost done, and I have several slides. I encourage you to go to my website, KirstenHill.com. These are all links to more reports on this.
So that's why they're changing the literature too, because they're not.
Yeah, right. And I just started this book, and I think this will be a good one. It's called Undoctrinate: How Politicized Classrooms Harm Kids and Ruin Our Schools and What We Can Do About It. This is published this year, so there's a lot of the same resources that I use have already, in the parts that I've read so far, are referenced in here. And in the end, I skipped to the end to see, okay, what are the remedies for this? And essentially, you know, the left is doing the march through the institutions, and it's taken a long time. I mean, like, buckle up. We've got a long journey ahead of us, and it's going to take us a long time, you know, through our, what we can, to get our children out of the schools, but there's 1.7 million students in Ohio schools. 90% of them are in traditional public schools. So it's a drop in the bucket. I think 33,000 is the amount of home-educated students. It jumped to 50,000 last year, but it'll probably go back down. So anyway, that's about all I have. If you have questions, yeah.
Question, please.
Is this affecting any of the charter schools or any of the private schools?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Or
And
as in American Math?
they'll be using the same materials. There are different degrees depending what school district. I mean, I went to this, I was going to show you here. The Ohio School Boards, this is their conference booklets, and I studied the sessions that were available. It's like 100 sessions. Over 20 of them are all critical race theory. This was the last 3 days. This is training the local school board members. So they've covered everything from the teacher of the universities, through the department, through the books, through the local school districts. So if you went there, you'd think this is the bandwagon you need to get on and do an equity in your school district. I'm sorry.
Charter schools?
Yeah, charter schools.
Private?
Yes.
Parochials?
Right. So differing schools doing it to different degrees, but you have to look and see. You know, you have to start going to their board meetings. I don't know if their board meetings are or talk with the board members of those schools. Send them to my website, have them look through it. They would be in those meetings and get familiar. Oh, have I seen some of that terminology? And, you know, that might be a way to, you know, kind of help them out. But it certainly could be there through their teachers and through their materials.
Could I ask, our superintendent mentioned something about they have just approved it to where they can hire non-teachers to substitute because there's an issue not being able to find enough substitute teachers. So what does that look like? Because I mean, they can bring anybody in and they're paid, I don't know what, and they're going to be here with our kids.
There is a shortage right now. There's a real crunch, and I hear
But to
about
hire
it.
non-teachers, that's just,
Yeah,
I don't even have a word for that.
What school are you talking about? Is it the West G school?
No, actually, I mean, Portage County.
There are, they have to do background checks on teachers, that sort of thing. So I don't really know, you know, at the local level. Let me grab somebody here.
I know, just had a comment about what she's saying.
Oh, okay.
I was offered a position.
Oh, okay.
But I have a bachelor's of business and
She's saying she was offered a position.
as a substitute, but I don't have any teaching credentials.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We do also oversees the licensing rules and stuff like that, but the local districts, you know, have to follow that. Yes.
I'm in Stowe, and they are teaching CRT. They deny it. They say it's DEI, same thing.
Yeah. So let's say
And we had 9 of us that spoke against it 3 times, 19 for it. They brought in people of color, probably 50 people in the audience stood up for it. The PTA, apparently, I've been told, are all for this. The parents aren't even upset. And it's like, why should we stick our necks out? I mean, even my mayor has the critical race theory at the city level, and he's on a committee to promote this at the schools.
Right.
Then my neighbor who has a young child in 5th grade history tells me, Mary, my daughter's in 5th grade, she thinks her dad is a white racist. And he said there are 35 and she has all these texts, and all the girls are saying they're gay. He said, I am forbidding her to see them. He doesn't know what to do. He said, I don't have money to put her in private school. I don't even know if she can help in private school. You know, they wouldn't even have this in private school.
You know, it crossed my mind yesterday when I was sitting in the room and the Bedford City Superintendent has a green shirt on that says social justice, and she's telling about that it's total, it's like now the school, in that case, to me, is a political action center. It's not just recruiting, but this is where you come to get active.
What do you do? How do you get people, how do you get parents?
See, you got that local district, so the local, you know, with local control, it's kind of like, I guess, local districts can, you know,
So you can't really do anything.
Help to bring his kid home.
it's gonna take time, like I said, it's gonna take time. Let me jump over here. Yes.
Yeah, we've done a lot of research on the property taxes, versus the grades that they're getting, and we're funding our own demise until we, we speak up and start not passing any more of these school levies.
You have to, stop passing the levies.
How many people gave public testimony against the COLA regulation resolution?
Through the fall, I'd say we had 10 people each meeting. And then on the day, October 13th, when the repeal happened, we had 20 that day. And there were 11 that wanted to repeal, and against sort of 10, I was tallying up. Which makes me think of one other term that one of the people who testified used. And this was a person who was on the low side. She had been a school psychologist for 6 years in Tennessee. She claimed that she moved to Ohio just because we passed that resolution last summer. Well, we repealed it that day. But the term she used to watch for was racial identity development. So that's what they're doing. And I think you could plug in sexual identity development.
Yes.
This is what, in the identity, you got identity politics. I mean, it's, it's dividing us.
Just real quick.
Yes.
Less than 50 people testified and over for that resolution. Approximately 50 people.
Yeah, I'd say probably
To
that.
answer her question, it doesn't matter what your family members in the community are saying. You need to write letters to your legislators, to your school board members, to testify what you believe, and you can hold before these things. Speak louder.
There we go.
Yeah, folks, the acoustics in here are challenging. When we have someone that has their hand up and recognized to speak, please, everyone else, hush, okay? I can't hear you, so.
Why is not at your website?
Okay, Kirsten Hill.
Say it again.
It's up on the screen.
Kirsten Hill. That's what it was.
Yeah, and I have a few cards over here too, if you'd like to take one. Let me ask this question.
So as a father of a daughter who's 2 with blue eyes and blonde hair, she's public enemy number 1, right?
No, number 2.
Yeah, that's true. And to me, this can all be simply boiled down in the phrase anti-white racism. I mean, that's what I think it is.
Yes,
I guess it's controversial, but my question is this. I think your efforts are noble, and to me, they seem like a rearguard action. Because the schools and the teaching academies and the university are completely controlled, right? And it's the universities that are really the root of this cancer and are generating it. You're on the front lines, but they're popping out teachers every year. So my question is, what is being done by conservatives across the state to fight the universities?
Yeah.
The teaching colleges?
I know.
How do you stop that?
I think up in Lake County, Tom Hack might be cooking up something, but really there isn't.
So come to the Ohio Constitution Study Group, because we're going to be talking a lot about what has happened, especially around universities. And in fact, you may find it interesting that some of the things that have become law are actually unconstitutional because the legislators and the various boards do not understand the state constitution. They keep legislating in favor of the corporatism, and understand universities are corporations.
Yeah, they are.
And so you have to, so we'll talk about that, Kirsten, I don't want to take your time, but it's all, it is something that can be dealt with, but once again, as this gentleman said, we have to have the proper knowledge to be active, to move on those legislators, because they're the only ones that can make the difference at the university level.
I want to, one other thing, it's real foundational, but the difference between a university, and this isn't exactly, to address what you're talking about, but it's a choice for a student on a college campus or a family to send their student to the college, and a choice the courses they choose. But K-12 is compulsory. So it's a whole different matter that and thus we've got the general law. Let me,
I think to your point, this has been going on our college campuses for decades. And so what we're seeing now, happening in our K through 12, is a product of breaking out these students out of these universities for decades. And I have a granddaughter who's in college. She wants to be a teacher, and it's so funny, all your resources. I sent her Prager University, David Horowitz, all of these people have been talking about this for years, and now I feel like we are behind the 8 ball. We're just seeing it now.
This book by David Horowitz, One Party Classroom. This was written in 2009, and he goes through, profiles 150 of the worst courses in colleges across the country. He has the name of the professor, profiles the professor about the course, and so, it's right here. It's not like we're just generalizing. It's really specific to it. Let me jump over here.
I think it's great that everyone shows up to meetings like this, to hear this kind of thing. We've been being active with our local school board, and trust meetings, and we go to local job and health board meetings. You gotta bring your kids. I have my 2 kids here. They hate half of these meetings we go to be honest with you. But they're hearing it. They go to school, they talk to their friends. These things come up in conversation. You don't realize if they have these kids here, these things they say.
Yeah, there's he was saying about you've got to go to the meetings and bring the children to the meetings. Bring your grandchildren, bring your children to the mornings. So they can learn. And this video is just a short video. I am not able to show it right now, but essentially that's what she's saying is mother calls on parents to equip the kids against vulnerability so that they, when they're in the school, they can recognize it and then they can bring it to the parents' attention.
But there's other things you hear about going to all these different meetings. Between the local, the job and health board, and the school board, no one wants to take responsibility for the things that they're making us do. The health board says, well, we didn't tell the school board they didn't do anything. They're making these choices. The school board says, well, we're doing what the county does. So there's 2 conflicts there. And just to Skip's point, just to Skip's point, we were at the Bainbridge Township trustee meeting last night, and they had a pamphlet there that they received from NOPAC asking for them to place a car charger on public land. So these things are there. You're at the meetings, you hear it, and you don't realize these things are everything's just coming at you all at once. You got to get everything, right?
Who hasn't asked the question? Yes.
students to be very involved, sit with your kids. My kids are in college age now, but you can't just send your kids to school now and be like, oh, how was your day? It was great. You have to find out what are they being told, and it has to be corrected in the home. And
You'll
this
hear-
fifth grade girl calling her father a racist, that's a problem.
That's the aim, this device is dividing.
Yeah.
And you will hear the administrators and teachers call them our kids.
Yeah.
And the parents, the terminology was home partners.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm also going to stop, but what happens in the schools when you're sticking up against something unusual? Are you put in a position like that a lot? And do you have, how do you do that? Do you feel like empowered that you can face that? Or are you like that for?
So let me point something out to you. I've been doing this since 2008. There are some things that work. When people stand up and speak out, that works. Small groups of people can make a difference. The other thing that is critically needed is our elected officials appoint the boards.
Yes.
And so I'm on the mental health board. Tom is on the mental health board. There's an organization in Geauga County called SOGI. Do you know about this organization?
Yeah.
Okay, SOGI is promoting transgenderism through libraries and so forth into our schools. They're teaching young kids who don't have the ability to mentally process this, that being gay, lesbian, whatever is a good thing. And so guess what's happening? It's confusing the crap out of our kids. So we in the health board are going to deal with it. Reach out to your elected officials. If you want to make a difference, number one, you got to speak up. You cannot be shy. Right now is not the time to be timid. You have got to, I'm been almost arrested on a number of occasions speaking out in public meetings downtown against WAC and so forth. It's not easy sometimes, but you have got to speak up. You have got to get involved. You have got to run for the state school board. That we just recently had school board election in November. How many conservatives in Geauga County, or Portage County, or around our counties got elected? Who even ran? And so we have got to get people to step up and to run for these positions, because the people that are running are the people creating this nonsense.
So with just capitalizing what Skip said, the really critical point and what you brought out, I don't know your name, sir, but it is the factor of 10. Each one of us has that, and I was talking with some trustees, which goes all the way through on local government in particular. Skip knows this, and that's why he's making the appeals he is, because the factor of 10 is always, we each know 10 people to talk to. Our neighbors, our family, whomever. And when we can make that factor of 10 work, now that becomes an algorithmic function in math. And that's what we have to produce. That's why the left is winning, exactly what Skip was saying. They've worked the math out. Conservatives are still sitting on Monday night couches watching football instead of taking and working the math out so that we can get that factor of 10 moving forward. So it's an appeal here to all that ran, those that won. I know I saw someone else that ran did not win, but we have to support those activities and move forward. Hey, March is coming up. Those that can, I'm putting my hat back in to run for precinct person. So we need to do those types of things too, because the Ohio and the Geauga County, every county party is important and becomes the helper to what goes on then to all the different bureaucratic entities as well. The bureaucrats are part of the problems, and we have to deal with that too. Thank you.
You know what, I'll just close with one thing, and then I'll be around if you want to talk to me. The state board meets the second Monday, Tuesday every month. And I would encourage anybody to come any month, except for August. We don't meet in August. On the second day of our meeting, we meet for 2 whole days, the Monday and the Tuesday. Either in the morning or the afternoon is when we have public testimony.
Shelby County right now. And that, I mean, obviously we've got what, 90,000 people or something, but that's 700 kids who are not being indoctrinated. And that doesn't include, that's not the final number, this is from September, so I'm still waiting for the final number. But that doesn't include the parents who have their kids in the system but are engaging and taking them, and they're doing the action civics or whatever it was called, the way it's supposed to be done. Yeah. They're, instead of the schools saying, oh, you get involved in this and we'll give you credit, the parents are taking the kids and letting the kids see what's happening through the worldview that the parents are supporting. And worldview matters, because that's what we're seeing in schools right now, are the worldviews that we're taught in the colleges with the teachers that are coming out now and teaching.
Yep.
You don't necessarily have to have a kid at the school to go to school board meetings. You don't have to have kids on the school board meetings. Your taxpayers, if you go to meetings, I'm going to tell you right now, when you go to that school board meeting, they see you sitting there without a mask on, they know exactly what. Just having people there, you don't have to speak, just having people there. It's intimidating to have a school board, they used to get 5, 6 people there, now they've got 200 people. They know people.
Yes.
So,
we do that, they keep playing that game, they pass the buck, who's responsible. I took 4 classes on what a school board member role really is. I took one for the state, I took one online, I took a Christian one, and then I had taken a conservative, or a patriot one. They all taught the exact same thing. The school board is elected, when they're elected, they are supposed to be writing the policy according to what the community wants, and then hiring a superintendent to carry out those policies. We've gotten so far off track, and they will pass the buck. And I have called, I've had an ombudsman that I had to speak with, I've spoken to the attorney twice, because of some of the issues. My granddaughter was one who was threatened that she could have charges brought against her and go to jail because she refused to call her teacher, who came out as a transgender the last 3 weeks by their preferred pronoun. My son is deceased 7 years ago, so and her mother doesn't do anything really about that. So my husband and I went there to talk to them, and we just kept giving us all this yada yada yada. I said, no, you have no right in demanding that my granddaughter start living by your morals. And she has her own moral foundation, and it is a God-given right. You have no right to force her. It's not real nasty. So it is up to you. You have got to go to those meetings, and you have to, and they are going to pass the buck. And I don't care what they say, this is the curriculum that we have to do, it is not. They can pick anyone that they want. But really, you guys are the only ones who can force them to change. And if it gets that bad, you can actually get petitions, but you have to have an attorney, pay for that, get the petition, and get it out. Yes. So, and you can also do that, if you want to withdraw your vote for funding of a levy, you can also do that. You can do a petition, and you know what, we want to take this off, they have to put it back on to have it voted for, and you can actually withdraw it. Because a gentleman who comes and does these meetings, because they're one of 49 million for schools, and he told us that. So, just keep that in your back pocket.
Okay, any more questions? One more.
So how difficult is it just to completely start a whole new school system, where you defund the teacher union?
I'm out. Say it again.
How difficult is it to just completely start a new school system, where you defund the teachers union, you defund the local public schools?
There is I mean, you kind of have to do one school at a time, I think. There is a group in Medina County that's meeting to form a new school under the Barney Charter School, which is in Hillsdale curriculum. Another option would be Hillsdale is a classical curriculum, and they use pencil and paper at their school, no online so those, all the distraction, they have it available now that a district can get a license to use their curriculum. So this is all rolling out this year. So there are options. You can present, you know, the Hillsdale.
There's a group in Colorado that did that. They literally started their own school.
Yeah.
Started like this.
Yeah,
And-
and you want to look for classical education.
How can you, because we all have a problem with all these children as they grow up and become communists
Yeah.
later on. So we have to define it, correct?
I shouldn't make it so, I mean, so there are different classifications of schools in Ohio. It's kind of like 4 different kinds. There's traditional public schools, which take 90%, well, maybe less than 90 now, but, and then there's charter schools, which are known as community schools in the code, and they get charter schools get public money, so they do need to they have to apply and get their charter approved. That's kind of the Medina group, I think, is going to go that route. And then there are private schools that aren't chartered, and they don't. I'm not exactly sure which category has to follow, you know, the standards, but most have to follow the standards and take the assessments, even if they do another curriculum and they do it privately. The Barney Charter or the Hillsdale School students, they don't, they take those tests and they don't have any problem passing them. You know, the state assessment tests. So it's quite a tangle. The teachers union is very powerful in Ohio. They don't want other schools to form to compete